also one of the weird things in Hearthstone. Sometimes when a deck is harder to win with, sometimes that just means it's not so good. But other times, just decks do have these just high skill caps.
All right, well, we're going to Malygos Druid versus the Token Druid. And again, I was talking about this with Admirable. I think it's so funny that Token Druid was probably the Druid that got hit the worst out of all the nerfs because of Giggly Inventor being pretty crucial to Token Druid decks. And yet, it's still performing probably the best in the Druid, out of all the Druid archetypes on ladder right now.
Yeah, people did not skip a beat. They just said, all right, time to put Violet Teacher back in the deck. Time to put the Oaken Summons back in, and the deck's just still really good.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was really good even before Boomsday, and Boomsday pretty much added Giggling Inventor to most of the Druid decks, not really much else. But, you know, you talk about having the nuts. Both players kind of sputtering out the first 3 turns here, but Feno's hand looks like it's going to get pretty explosive very quickly if this Violet Teacher goes unchecked.
Ooh, it's interesting to see that he actually has a single copy of Innervate in that deck. And it does sometimes just help you go off with these Violet Teacher turns. You could pretty much make an entirely full board. The downside of this, obviously, is that you would be weak to a Spreading Plague, but Impact actually is just going to respect this minion instantly and just use that Naturalize here.
Right. And he kind of needs to get cards out of his hand too, double Ultimate Infestation.
Yeah, a lot of times as the Malygos Druid, you're okay with playing a little bit of a longer game. The games that you lose is when you don't find that Spreading Plague on time. And look at that, Feno has found the ramp.
Found the ramp, but perhaps going to pull out the other Violet Teacher. Has the Innervate Power of the Wild for maximum pressure, but chooses instead to opt out of it because he does have Nourish plays for the following turn.
But man, Florist has looked so good every single time I've seen it play today. Just in the last series, Muzzy was able to reduce his Malygos instantly to 2 mana, and having a 1 mana Lich King, that's not bad.
Oh my goodness gracious. Talk about plays that aren't bad. Picking up Arcane Tyrant. And now Feno can say the Innervate for Ultimate Infestation the next turn. And that already is a wide enough board for Soul the Forest and Savage Roar to be huge points of concern for Impact.
Yeah, a lot of times, even just the 4 minions on board, you get so scared of things like Savage Roar and Branching Paths, but being able to jam down this Lich King and the swipe in the same turn, now Fena's going to have to be the one to try and answer the board. And as Token Druid, you really want to play ahead in this matchup. You don't want to be the one answering threats from the Malygos Druid.
And you can see Impact is prioritizing keeping the Lich King alive more than anything else at the moment. Force Feno to invest more resources to killing Lich King. That's why it's not Wild Growthing for Ultimate Infestation, which was kind of my first thought when he drew that card.
And we just see this Innervate pay off huge here, being able to cheat out that Ultimate Infestation a turn earlier. You know, Innervate's a card that we haven't really seen play in a long time, but when it's able to do this, when you get that Ultimate Infestation out a turn earlier, a lot of times when you play that card, your win rate skyrockets.
A little bit of audio lag from the double spectators. Feno burns Whispering Woods, but not the biggest of deals. Whispering Woods can also be a liability because of how it plays into Spreading Plague, like you were talking about.
Yeah, that's why it's really hard to find this balance as Token Druid to make a big enough board, but also not be weak to the Spreading Plague yourself.
Yep.
Sometimes one of the things you could do, though, is use that Whispering Wood without the Soul of the Forest. Then if a Spreading Plague does come out instead of a swipe, you could trade it in and do a Spreading Plague of your own. But now with that milling off the top, he removes the access from that.
Yeah, Feno has a lot of support cards, but nothing like big on the development side. 2 Soul of Forest, Spreading Plague, all these are great reactive stuff for what Impact develops. Nothing too substantial here. Feno's going to draw with Nourish.
And I feel like that's going to make it really hard for that second copy of Ultimate Infestation to come back. Because, as you said, he's really not working with much here. And when that's the case and you can't even dump these cards well, how do you draw what you need to?
Right, and then unless he throws in a Savage Roar, he's also going to burn another card. So in a way, that Whispering Woods would have been a much better pickup in that specific scenario, because you know your opponent's going into the Ultimate Infestation turn. You would have loved to develop something proactive that's small, because right now this 5/5 gets targeted so easily.
Yeah, for sure. And now that Impact had the time to cast that Ultimate Infestation, as long as he finds Spreading Plague here, I think he's going to have a very comfortable time closing out this game.
Oh yeah, and now he's got Malygos with the Floop. So over the course of 2 turns, we'll have really powerful opportunities to clear. Impact thinking about if it's worth playing the second Arcane Tyrant off the Floop itself because he also has branching paths. And I mean, he could be pushing for a lethal opportunity too.
I'm actually a little bit surprised by this, just because Impact did see that Feno's turn last time was very awkward, and just playing this Arcane Tyrant makes his Spreading Plague even that much better. And now Feno just has a board where he's been able to find 4 minions that don't get cleared that easily. So I feel like this play from Impact could really punish him here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Impact does have some defense. Malfurion pickup is nice. Still has Malygos opportunities.
Yeah, and also being able to play that Malfurion activates both of these Spellstones if he wants to clear as many minions as he feels is necessary.
Oh, Cenarius.
That's an interesting card for Feno to play. I guess that's for matchups like Odd Warrior, where you just want that just extra threat to try and push through.
To get over the top. Huh.
So I guess Impact just took a line where he's playing for board as hard as possible, realizing that if he doesn't die in these next couple turns with the second UI in hand, he's just going to be absolutely fine, because if this game goes long, he's just going to be so favored to win because he has that Malygos win condition.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. Feno picks up Whispering Woods, number 2. Opponent already has gone pretty wide on the board, but it is scary in the face of Spreading Plague. Spreading Plague. And also because Feno doesn't really have much besides that Whispering Woods to play to develop onto the board. It's kind of a tough situation to be in.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you can do in this matchup, which I talked about earlier, instead of using that Whispering Woods with the Soul of the Forest, you could just play the Whispering Woods and hope that your opponent doesn't have swipe, because sometimes then they respond with the Spreading Plague, and then you could trade in all your tokens, and they get a crazy Spreading Plague of your own. So although like it's almost the case in every matchup where you always go Whispering Woods, Soul of the Forest, it's something that just might not be the play here. Wow, Feno is just looking to push damage. I mean, it's a lot, but it's not even close to enough, right? He's leaving him on like 10 here.
I mean, this is kind of what Impact was trying to avoid too, right? That's why he cleared off those minions. Imagine if he was able to keep even just another 2/2 on the board. It'd be pushing basically game-ending damage. And Impact now can gain 5 from Malfurion, 3 from the hero power. And that's just going to put him well out of range.
Yeah, I mean, with the line that he took, Feno had to realize that he gets absolutely blown out by both Branching Pass and Malfurion. But we did see that one Branching Pass used last turn from Impact, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to count also if Impact is lethal, like if Cenarius or something or Branching Pass could finish it. It's 5, 12, 18 plus 6, 24 plus, the twig.
It looks good.
Yeah. I mean, that Branching Pass ended up being the lethal. So Feno ended up trying to go for a 2-turn lethal push. Sort of. I mean, putting your opponent at 7 is the exactly reliable 2-turn. But that's going to be game number 1. And I like how Impact was able to recognize the macro game. Sure, you could get much better value sniping a Arcane Tyrant with like a Spellstone. But recognizing that Feno's best way to win, especially given that his hands have been very awkward with development, right? He must be holding combo pieces, ways to finish the game, because he's not developing on the board. So instead, he just removes his opponent's ways to have an out, and realizes that he can win the long term, especially with that Cenarius snipe.
But not too big of a surprise there. That Malygos Druid is very favored versus that Token Druid. A lot of times just being able to just have access to Spreading Plague and just those threats at the end of the game always gets you there. But Feno, he just, not too behind in the series. Losing game 1, not the biggest deal.
Yeah, I do feel like Conquest these days often comes down to the third deck after the bans, because a lot of times there's 1 or 2 decks that you're really afraid to play, because if it just gets the wrong side of the matchups, you're just either in big trouble, or even worse, it's the deck that your opponent's trying to target. So the first couple games tend to be more of like the foundation of the series, but then it comes down to like, can Hunter beat like an all aggro lineup, or can Odd Warrior get past those anti-control decks?
And that could definitely be Hunter for Impact here, just because Feno did say that he was able to reverse sweep it in his first series of the day. So then maybe that's what Feno is trying to target with his lineup a little bit. I'd imagine it would be the case that he has Zoo then, right?
He has Cube
Oh
Warlock.
yeah, Cube Warlock.
Yeah.
That's something we talked about before. I would have to imagine that does pretty well against Hunter.
Yeah, I feel like Cube Warlock. One of the things that people underrate the most is its defensive capability. People always talk about how strong Skull is with Cube and Dark Pact. But I think one of the things that deck is also good at is just surviving for forever if the cards line up.
Gul'dan Hero Power is just something that can keep you in the game for so many turns.
Yep. Skull into Void Lord can stop pretty much any early pressure that you can put against it. Gives it so much time to set up the cube combos.
That was like part of the reason why Hunter did not see play for a while. Is just when Void Lord was at the peak popularity, they do not deal with that card well at all.
Yeah. Well, they're a lot better with it now, but things like Spider Bomb get a lot worse when there's so many Voidwalkers on the board and whatnot. Feno gonna draw. His hand looks pretty awkward from this spot. I think the most important thing for him is to put pressure on the Hunter. That's why you see him use Power of the Wild so aggressively, just for the Panther. But how do you answer this Houndmaster Shaw?
I mean, that's a card that if it sticks, you start to get scared real fast, especially if a cube comes down. That's a pan out that just always beats Druid for the most part. Just the Shaw into the cube makes it so hard to ever stick a board. But just being able to go wide here.
Yeah.
We talked about earlier, this deck does not play Unleash the Hounds.
Well, what's so funny is, yeah, like this is really intimidating. But Mind Control Tech gives you Rush on one of the 1/1, so that trades into a minion. And then you have the 3 attacks. I mean, Whispering Woods has been all but nullified.
Shaw is just so good, man. It was able to clear 2 extra tokens there, giving the Rush to both the 1/1 and the Mind Control Tech. And that's exactly what you're just looking to do, just being able to answer these turns and not die early as the Hunter.
Yeah. Hunter has been on the rise since 12.2, or the balance patch. It's kind of hard to say exactly when that balance patch went live, but let's just call it 12.2. Largely because people expected Druid to be so good. And so when everyone's like playing Druid and playing these greedy Malagos Druids or Togwaggle, whatever shenanigans, Hunter just kills you way before you can able to set up everything.
Yeah, they play a Katharina, and you don't have the answer for that a lot of times as Druid.
Right. Katharina having that massive Oak Heartlight effect where it's just so much power and presence on the board that it feels like you can't win from that spot. Impact can develop with this play dead, but also can save it for cube combos. I kind of like putting pressure on the Druid just as much as possible. Because you can tell, Feno is in an uncomfortable spot. He would love to have Nourish on 5, but was forced to do something else to try to respond to the board state, not take too much damage.
Yeah, a lot of times there's just like those 2 win conditions as Hunter. It's either you pressure them as much as possible, or you just try and make just an incredibly big board with Witchwood Grizzlies with cube. And I feel like, without Witchwood Grizzly in the hand, he's going to just try and pressure his opponent as just fast as possible.
14 power. That's almost good enough for death next turn if Feno's not careful. He does have Spreading Plague.
So did Feno not play that Arcane Tyrant with the Nourish last turn?
I thought he wanted to save it for Spreading Plague because the Arcane Tyrant matched up really poorly stat-wise.
That makes a lot of sense. The minion's just going to die anyway. Why not add it to that big board?
The only problem is his follow plays are also pretty weak. Although the Power of the Wild might be really clutch too.
Yeah, I mean, that looks pretty good to me. If you go Spreading Plague, you go with buff, so these 5/5s are not taking as good of a trade. Obviously, we get punished by this Rexar here, but I feel like you're just trying to buy time to be able to play that UI and not die on the backswing.
Yeah, the only thing, though, is if your opponent has Katharina and pulls out a Devil Sword or the King Crush, you just lose. So Feno's being extremely defensive here and trying to see if he can maybe get that swing turn, Spreading Plague, Soul the Forest even, potentially. We'll see how this pans out.
Ooh, and this is actually a little bit interesting. Rather than kill one of those 5/5s, he's going to make the board a little bit wider by adding the X to the board.
I like this a lot. Because I was thinking, if you kill off a 5/5, you actually make your Spreading Plague worse.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Although,
you talked about Katharina.
I mean,
it's pulling out a Witchwood Grizzly.
Yeah, it's not pulling out the big charge minion.
But I got to say, this is going to make Spreading Plague, Tyrant, and Soul of the Forest look real good here.
Yeah. I mean, Feno's probably really happy to see that Witchwood Grizzly as opposed to a Crush. But wow, is this a board swing and a half?
So we were talking about that Feno was trying to find the spot where he'd be able to play UI and survive, and having this many 1/5s on the board. It's also the case that most people don't play Mossy Horror anymore just because part of the reason that it was in the decks, not only because of Spreading Plague, but because of Giggling Inventor. Now that that got moved to 7 mana, I don't know if everybody's playing in their Hunter list anymore.
I saw a few people. First series today, I think I saw a couple of Mossy Horrors. But you're right. Most people started rotating it out of their deck list, which might make some other cards much better now, like Spreading Plague, incidentally.
Yeah, it actually is the case that Impact is still playing one Mossy Horror in his deck, so could have had the potential to blow out that Spreading Plague turn. But as it stands right now, this is a wide board for Feno.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Rexar just came out. That was real good.
Battlecry deal 14 damage.
And
Pretty
also
impressive.
just give you one of the best hero powers in the game.
Well, Feno has Ultimate Infestation primed and ready to go.
Yeah, I would imagine he's trying to figure out if he's making any attacks. Probably not, I would imagine. You just want to make Impact do these trades.
Oh, a second Plague.
So now Impact knows he could just play any wide board he wants to, with both Spreading Plagues being gone now.
Yeah, really trying to chop down this Witchwood Grizzly before any potential cube comes out. I think that's the way it can get locked out of the game if this Witchwood Grizzly is able to replicate in some capacity. Oh!
And he only found the one copy, but he found it just in time.
God.
It also just kills those eggs, making him 2 5/5s.
Yeah.
Now Feno will not have access to another Spreading Plague. He doesn't
Oh,
have a way
yeah.
to deal with a board this big. Even if he finds something like UI into just Whispering Woods Soul, he's just going to be dead.
Yeah,
And Feno realizes that the Mossy Horror tech card, despite, you can't hit Giggling Inventor anymore, hitting Spreading Plague, that's good enough.
Yeah, well, Death Hunter also has that added benefit of having their own eggs on the board a lot. So Mossy Horror can not only win you tempo by destroying your opponent's minions, but also set up those 5/5s for the follow-up push. So this was kind of, a very good example of why many people consider Hunter to be such a good deck, both in tournaments and on ladder, because of how well it matches up against Druid, which is still a fairly popular deck right now.
Yeah,
So it just goes to show you should be playing Death Metal Hunter.
If Feno was coming in his tournament trying to target Death Rattle Hunter, that's a pretty tall task, as we saw there, just being able to pick up the win. And that's why I feel like that game actually is going to have huge implications for the rest of the series. Not only is Impact up 2-0, but he's able to get a win with that deck that Feno was potentially looking to target.
Well, what's scary now, too, is Odd Rogue is what remains. And Cube Warlock, primarily because of how much pressure comes out.
Yeah.
It's not unwinnable by any means, but, I mean, Odd Rogue is just some of the most aggression that we've seen out of any deck in the metagame currently.
But Feno going to lead with that Token Druid first, when this is the only good matchup for him left. Just being able to have access to the Oaken Summons and the Spellstone really deals with the early game pressure of Rogue.
I'm sorry about that. 2 Wild Growths and a Nourish. That could be a deceptive hand. You might think it would look good on paper, but Feno needs a little bit more than just mana crystals to win this game.
And a lot of times you'll see Odd Rogues mulligan all their cards looking for a 1-drop just because of how important it is. But this is actually one matchup where, say, missing the 1-drop isn't as important, just because the 3-drops are that much better against Druid, finding that Hench Clan Thug or the Vicious Fledgling.
But, I mean, you got to see what we're talking about. It's great to have Wild Growth and Nourish. I mean, those are cards people are talking about as Druid's strongest cards. But when you can't answer a Vicious Fledgling, this can get really bad really quick.
I'm a big fan of taking attack. The way you win this game is that Vicious Fledgling carrying, so just hope he doesn't have the removal. The 1/1s aren't going to win you the game if he does have, say, Swipe here.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, the 1/1s can be a liability if they end up building a big board for Spreading Plague.
So,
oh man,
a lot of times you do want to ramp with Nourish, but this could be a situation where Feno can maybe decide to go for the draw here. He also has the option, if he thinks he could slow down the game using, say, this Whispering Woods. If Impact does not, take a defensive line, he could use the Savage Roar to potentially clean up the board. But I think, just going for the draw here, having, say, even a bigger Whispering Woods next turn seems like a pretty good line.
Yeah, it's also the turn before Fungal Mancer, too, which is where it really starts hurting a lot. Oh my
Impact
gosh.
failing to find that Wind Fury, but finding the stealth does mean that this thing will survive another turn. But Feno finding that Malfurion, that's probably the best card you could ever want here on 7. especially when it's the case that you just cannot kill this Vicious Fledgling right now.
Yeah, and Impact's choice not to develop much right now, to conserve his resources and take it a little bit slower, ends up giving Druid a lot of breathing room because there's not extra minions to push past his 1/5.
So if Impact wanted to, he could start to try and push a lot of damage with Void Ripper in this deckhand.
Yeah.
Star Creeper turns into a 5-attack minion.
Jeez. Oh my goodness. Wind Fury it is.
Only just took him a couple tries.
Yeah, there's only so many 30% that you won't be able to get. Takes Divine Shield, I like it. Force.
But now that minion is just so threatening, you know if a Cold Blood or even just Fungal Mancer comes down on it, that's just representing so much damage on the board. I feel like it's almost a case where Feno might be forced to go with the Spreading Plague here and just say maybe punch down this Tar Creeper, which doesn't feel too good, but it does keep a 1/5 alive.
My thoughts are plagued.
Well, assuming he doesn't have Fungal Mancer or Vile Spine Slayer.
Yeah. I feel like that's the hardest decision here. If you do go for the Spreading Plague, are you going to go for this Armor Up and hope the Tar Creeper trades, or are you going to try and punch it?
I feel like on 6 mana, there's just so much potential punish. But it is a hard decision to make. Plus, there's a really significant trade-off because it's 3 life you wouldn't have, as opposed to giving your opponent the 7 life. Looks like he's choosing a trade, wants to prioritize that board potential. And with 2 Sword of the Forests, I don't blame him.
And this is actually going to be worse against Fungal Mancer, because if he left that 7-1 up, the Fungal Mancer did not line up too well. You would only been able to push that Void Ripper to the face, but now hitting both of these minions means that he's going to get the clear board and both his minions be pretty thick at the same time.
Yeah.
So this cost him a lot of health going for this decision.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things from Impact side too, you know, minion positioning for Fungal Mancer.
A lot of times you're just thinking, you know, if I hit 2 minions, I'm going to be fine anyway, but sometimes the math, like even there, say if that Tar Creeper was left up, it could just have a lot of different outcomes.
My thoughts are plagued.
This is looking really bad for Feno. Oaken Summons can gain 6 life, but that still won't even deal with the Vicious Fledgling unless he commits Power of the Wild and Savage Roar. And even then, you might just die.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to try to figure out this turn is how are we killing this Vicious Fledgling? And then after that, yeah, I think he's going for that play that you saw with the Savage Roar and the Power of the Wild. So I do like this balance of making a defensive play, but also trying to develop at the same time, knowing that if you don't try and, you know, form some aggression yourself, you're just going to end up dying in the long run.
I think that should be it, though. Cold Blood all but seals it. I think he had lethal anyways with Deadly Poison and SI. But that's a 3-0 super quick. And I think it just goes to show you potential flaws in Druid's game plan. Yes, one of the strongest, most versatile classes, or quite possibly the most versatile class in Hearthstone. But also, when you're expecting it with the field like this, I mean, Impact was able to narrow it down and get a very convincing victory.
Yeah, he was able
Right about now, the Funk Soul Brother, check it out.